here we are once again, everyone. New lesson, new week. I hope that all of you had a good, holiday weekend and that you're feeling ready to continue doing some writing. Uh, so, got people rolling in. Love it. All right. We are, I think, now just past the halfway mark. This is, I believe, week number 7 or 8. And that means that we are pretty much, beginning that final home stretch of Conchas y Café, where we're going to start finalizing people's work. And in about, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks, I think it's 4 weeks, we're going to be actually collecting people's work to then be put together as part of the next issue of Conchas y Café Zine. So, for all of you that are relatively new, just got started a couple of weeks ago, welcome. And of course, for everyone else that's been here since the beginning, all of you are starting to get feedback on all of your work. And I'm going to try to finish off the work that was submitted for review on Google Classroom by the end of this week. So everyone should be all caught up with feedback directly from me. Of course, next week, a week from today, will be another workshop session. So just like last week when we were meeting and doing separate breakout rooms, next week we're going to be doing the same. And to ensure that no one gets kicked out or isn't able to participate during the workshop sessions, please try your best to be on time at 6:30, so that way we can use the entirety of the time to dedicate to everybody's work. It's always good to make sure that we have enough time for people to get feedback on their writing. Does anyone have any questions about what's going on, where we're at up to this point in the workshop series? No? All right. Sounds good. As Abraham is doing, I'm watching y'all. All right. So let's go ahead and get into some quote analysis, right? And today actually is going to be slightly different than normal, because today I actually, kind of like with the Eduardo Galeano, I'm actually presenting you excerpts from the book, The War of Art. I translated this a long time ago, and actually when I was creating the handout, I realized that my earlier translation could have been improved. So ahora aquí tienen una traducción un poquito más limpia. Y aquí, como dije, viene de La Guerra del Arte, and this is written by Steven Pressfield. If you're not familiar with The War of Art, it's basically a book that was inspired by The Art of War by it was Miyamoto Musashi, or Musashi Miyamoto, I believe. But this is basically looking at art and the way in which we practice art. The first excerpt is called Resistance and Procrastination. Y aquí, esta primera cita dice: procrastinación es la manifestación más común de la resistencia, porque es la más fácil para racionalizar. No nos decimos, nunca voy a escribir mi sinfonía. Más bien decimos, voy a escribir mi sinfonía empezando mañana. And in English, resistance and procrastination, it says, procrastination is the most common manifestation of resistance because it's the easiest to rationalize. We don't tell ourselves, I'm never going to write my symphony. Instead, we say, I am going to write my symphony. I'm just going to start tomorrow. So, ¿cómo les parece? What do y'all think about Stephen Pressman's quote here?
I think it's true. Procrastination, it's like, I'm going to go on a diet, but I'm going to wait, or I'm going to change my life. No, I'm going to start going to church, but I'm going to wait till I get my life together,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you never do have your life together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the correction. Yes, it was Sun Tzu, the person that wrote The Art of War. So, yeah, thank you, Abraham. I'm thinking of the Five Rings, which is a
Yeah, that's what I was gonna tell
Yeah.
you. You were thinking on that one too.
the Five Rings, which is similar to the Art of War, but we
Better.
digress. But we digress. Yeah, I think that you're kind of hitting hitting the nail on the head, so to speak, right? Miss Lois, Tina, this could definitely speak to people trying to get their lives together, but sort of putting it off. Does anyone else feel like this rings true for them personally?
Yes. I think I don't know why I'm stuttering, but I've been like the king of procrastination in so many areas of my life, and but the good thing is that although we may relate, just about all of us, to procrastination in some form or other, we're all here today. I mean, that says something, that we're here today to work and learn, and so we didn't procrastinate on showing up today. And then when it comes to my poetry, definitely sometimes I do procrastinate. There's been whole years that I probably haven't written anything for a couple years in a row, but in the past few years, I usually don't procrastinate too much about writing poetry. So I can be kind of proud in that. Although I do procrastinate in a lot of really super important areas of my life, I mean, big time. It's not healthy. The level of procrastination in some areas of my life, but in terms of the poetry book that we're publishing here with DSTL Arts in the artists and program, developing artist program. I think there I can be proud that I've written a book. I got to the end of the book, and if anything, I wrote too much. So I didn't quite procrastinate, because now it's like taking stuff out. And I've been doing that like last night, for the last week at least. I mean, more than a week for the past few years, but especially in the last week, I've been like either taking in suggestions or not really wanting to take suggestions, and then eventually taking suggestions that you all had for some of my poems. And so, I mean, my point is I've been working on it a lot, lately, last night and the night before and the day before. So
that's good.
So I guess that's like a negative and a positive. The negative is that in much of my life, I am a huge procrastinator, and that does get in the way of my life and success in life. And yet, in terms of poetry, not always, but often lately, I haven't procrastinated at that. So
yeah, thanks, Gustavo.
I don't know if that rings true to anyone else, or I'm kind of hoping it would, since we're here because we love writing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that what you're trying to articulate, Gustavo, is that it can be something that's compartmentalized, right? We can procrastinate in one area of our life, but not in others, because of whatever motivations we might feel, which is, I think, a good thing for us to consider. Ms. Luz, you were patiently waiting.
I was actually woke up thinking about this because I've been procrastinating about something. But I remember a friend of mine, he did something that I've been wanting to do, but I don't, I guess, have the guts to do it. And I asked him, how did he find the courage to do what he was doing, or to reach this goal? And he said something that stuck with me. He said, we don't really believe we're mortal, and so we put things off till tomorrow. So there's a concept in Buddhism about impermanence, that everything is impermanent, that everything is transitory, everything is changing constantly. So he said we're not really in touch with that impermanence or with that sense of our own mortality. So then we believe in a tomorrow. And he said, you'll do this when you know there's no tomorrow. When you realize for a fact that things need to be done today. And I thought to myself that that's definitely what it takes to confront that. So bottom line, don't believe in tomorrow. Do it today.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a great observation, and I think that definitely does at least explain for some people, right? The reason why procrastination exists. Probably a lot more than we think. David, and then Abraham. Sorry, David, you're on mute.
Oops, sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. So first of all, what Luz says hits home because I've been sort of feeling that the last few days, few weeks. But I've also, Gustavo stole my thunder because I think I'm the king of procrastination. It's been like my lifelong debilitation. And for me, focusing on the fact that I'm procrastinating makes it worse, and I'll procrastinate more. So I've been really trying to focus on the motivations behind it. And for me, it's a lot of self-doubt and, often lack of motivation. So when I think of it in that way, I can actually kind of think of a solution like, okay, yes, I plagued with this self-doubt, whereas, I just got to get past that and do it. Whereas if I just focus on the procrastination itself, it's like I get bogged down in the procrastination and feel the guilt, at least knowing self-doubt is my weakness. It's like, okay, and then buck up and just do it. At least for me, I don't think that's going to work for everybody, but I think it will work to kind of analyze what is my reason for procrastinating, or what is behind the procrastination.
Right. Yeah, I think that it does require a lot of self-reflection. I appreciate that Mauricio feels like watching Walking Dead instead of being in class, but but obviously, that I think does relate to, maybe that sort of like fear of completing something or whatever our motivations might be, but yeah, thanks, David. Abraham?
Well, David, you kind of say what I wanted to say about basically figure out what is the reason you're procrastinated. I think that's the one that helps a lot, because you can then focus what's stopping me. And the worst thing is, like, I think we get fearful that we will suck at it, it will be bad. And I think once we realize that most of the things that work is because they have a lot of failure behind them, the more we fail is the easier it gets, and the more confidence you will gonna build, because you don't fear that you're gonna fail at it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it too. All of these things are very accurate. Like, none of you are wrong in your assessment of procrastination, and maybe even what Stephen Pressfield is saying. Tina, and then Mauricio.
I just want to make something perfectly clear about your abilities and whatnot and your talent. You all are all very talented. Everybody here, and even the ones who didn't show up, they're also talented. You're all talented. You're all worthy. You're all put out good work. So just remember that. Just forget about your confidence, because you're all good enough. Okay, I'm done.
Tina's right, and I think that it's also really important to recognize that, your motivations for even just being here today, say something to your abilities, and your motivations for doing something. You didn't put off being in the class, so that's also something I think to remember. So Mauricio, and then Kathy.
To piggyback on what Tina said, we're much better sometimes than we often think of ourselves. I think we're our own worst judges, and we kind of hold ourselves accountable to sometimes to an impossible standard, just because we can. And on another note, also, kind of going a different direction, but I think when we like think of ourselves a certain way, like maybe we have a profession or something that we know ourselves as, like if I were to call myself a writer, I would hold my writings to a higher standard and procrastinate more for fear of rejection than I would something new, say like photography or drawing or, acting. And have more chances to fail because I'm not expecting to create a masterpiece from the get-go. So like if we can find a way to like hack our minds and say, well, if we're always beginners, we're not afraid to fail, that means we can kind of produce things and fail more often so that we can get to that point of getting better and building up that confidence. But sometimes we have that fear of having to produce great work because we've been doing something for a certain amount of time, or our circles know us as poets or writers or authors. So there's this pressure to like always kind of live up to that expectation. But if we can all like see like, our profession, we can't lose focus of like that failure can be our friend, and failure can also be misinterpreted like in different ways. Like to me, a failure is not writing in a day, which sometimes can have its own consequences, because just because you don't write doesn't mean that you're not in the active process of writing. You're gathering material or gathering inspiration or living, which can also be the fodder for writing. So those are my 2 cents.
Those are great observations, Mal, and I think that it maybe even touches on a concept that Miss Luce brought up, and the idea of impermanence and attachment. Right? There's perhaps that attachment that maybe does generate a sense of fear and a sense of fear of failure specifically, but also even a fear of success. So yeah, very, very good observations. Thank you for reminding us of those things, Mal. Kathy, and then I think we'll move on to our next quote.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to say might lead to that too. Just going back just a tiny bit, the reason why we're all drawn here is, and this is a tribute to you, Luis and Abraham, you guys create a safe space. You create a safe space, and you're also very compassionate. And that is what I think the first few sessions, I was definitely the last minute contributor to the zine, because I was so terrified of all my stuff, and I would just procrastinate to the last minute. You guys have formatted it so that we can't do that, but you did it within a container of it still being a safe space through the workshops and routing to us. I never feel severe judgment, but I do get some great learning every time I get the feedback from the whole group. We feel safe with you, with each other. And I think it'd be cool to try and turn that into self-compassion, that compassion that we give to each other, to ourselves, to see if that might allow us to fail fast. What Mauricio was saying, fail fast is something I always tell our teams. We can fail fast and we're going to get through it. But the shame that comes with it, nobody wants to fail fast. So that takes you to take it away.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting concept, to fail fast. I think it almost makes you think of like tearing off the Band-Aid quickly so that it doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah.
And I think that all of that does sort of maybe culminate or tie into a lot of the things that we're talking about, in the sense of we strive to always be comfortable. We always find that zone of comfort that we feel good about, and then the fear of going outside of that can cause procrastination and inhibit growth, and so all of those things are very, very like personal development type of things. And as artists, we have sort of like a different layer of that on top of just the everyday personal growth that all of us hope to experience. So that could potentially bring us if we can find the connection to the next one, right, which is resistance and self-doubt, la resistencia y la duda. La duda puede ser un aliado. Es porque sirve como indicador de la aspiración. Refleja el amor por algo que soñamos con hacer y deseo, el deseo para hacerlo. Si te encuentras preguntándote y a tus amigos, ¿de verdad soy escritor? ¿De verdad soy artista? Probablemente es porque sí lo eres. El innovador falso es demasiado confiado en sí mismo. El verdadero está muerto de miedo. Resistance and self-doubt. Self-doubt can be an ally. This is because it serves as an indicator of aspiration. It reflects love of something we dream of doing, and desire to do it. If you find yourself asking yourself and your friends, am I really a writer? Am I really an artist? Chances are you are. The counterfeit innovator is wildly self-confident. The real one is scared to death. What do y'all think of this? ¿Cómo les parece?
It sounds like the outer man is like a show off, a bragger. I'm gonna do this, that, and the other. But the inner one is like, oh no, I'm not. No, you can't do that because they might not like it. Oh, I'm gonna be in this movie, or I'm gonna fix my house this way. And then inside is like, I know I can't do it. Why did I tell him that?
Yeah. Abraham, I see you raised your hand.
Well, this reminded me of, somebody asked me if I watch anime. I say yes, depends on which anime, right? 'Cause that's a lot of really weird ones sometimes. They recommended me this one called Blue Period, and it's about the basically an artist who's trying to go to an art school, but you can see a lot of self-doubt on the artist, and you can see him trying to be the artist he wants to be, but in the whole process he's doubting himself, which I kind of agree on that on the quote, but also feel like not everybody handles the same way, because I sometimes see people who say they are artists but they don't do it. They just want to say they are. So it kind of falls both ways. And then some people who are really confident on themselves and are doing the thing they want to be, right? So it just kind of depends who you are, I guess. Different people.
Yeah, I think that, there's like the last sentence, right? The counterfeit innovator is wildly self-confident. The real one is scared to death. I think that does speak volumes of those kind of people that do sort of walk with like a swagger, but in the end, they sort of are just like, I want to say, they're masters of what already exists, and they're not really innovating. They're not bringing anything new to the table. So, their success might be limited. But again, success is relative, right? All of our definitions of success have to be unique because we're all individuals. So, those are just my 2 cents. Mauricio, you raised your hand?
Yeah, I actually disagree with this one. I feel that they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think you could still feel confident about your ability, especially if you have an idea that is different and you have faith in it, and still be scared to, make sure that you honor that innovation as well. I think what Stephen Pressfield was coming from was writing about like the show offers in Hollywood, and I think he was, because when he wrote this, he was talking about his time when he was writing The Legend of Bagger Vance. So I think he wanted to touch on some of these people in Hollywood that really act like they are the best writers ever, which is definitely the part of the game. But I I think that when you are mastering something, you can still feel that fear, but that doesn't mean that you have to be like the stereotypical, like, nervous about my ability. I don't think I'm great yet. Like, I feel like that's a stage that everyone can relate with, but I don't feel that someone that is wildly confident has to be a counterfeit. I feel that that's a stage that we can aspire to and one day get to without going too over the edge of being just too confident that you don't think you can learn anything else, but also knowing that your ability to say has a price, your worth, especially when you've been a working artist, and you can say, well, I know that my level of expertise, say, as a photographer, is this range, and not say, working for exposure no mas.
Right, that's very true, And I think that it is also, something that everybody definitely experiences early in their career. A lot of people, it's difficult to make the leap from being, an average everyday, 9 to 5 type of job, kind of lifestyle, to then, making the leap to being a working artist. It's not always the easiest, and it does take time to build that up, and a certain level of skills that need to be put in place before that can happen, and have a sense of security. But I think it does come down to that, right? Like a sense of security in yourself, and as you do build that sense of confidence, the self-doubt does diminish. It's always going to be there if you're, a true innovator, right? Like what Mauricio's trying to get at, and what maybe the quote was trying to get at. But it's yeah, like everybody goes through phases, and sometimes our self-doubts are there, and they're heavy on us, they're a burden, and other times they're maybe just insecurities, but we're able to push through. Ani?
I just wanted to add a little something else to what Mauricio said. I understand where all of that is coming from. I just wanted to add another perspective that sometimes, even when you have confidence, even when in your abilities, even though you have experience and skill and talent and all of that, even have evidence, right, that you've created something. I find that even experienced novelists will say this, that every novel is different, and every process for each book is different. And it's almost, you're not completely starting from scratch, but anytime you're challenging yourself to write or create something that is, a little bit scary, a little bit outside of your comfort zone, which hopefully as artists that, that we're always trying to go there. There's always going to be that fear, and that kind of letting yourself kind of feel like you're out of control, and that you're a beginner and exploring and discovering for the very first time. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And if you're really committed to the act of creation, that you can be in awe of it, and like a first timer seeing things for the first time every single time. And that if you think you've got the formula, and you're overly confident about what you're going to be able to create, I think you're not allowing yourself to really grow and learn and discover like you would if you treated it like it wasn't a foregone conclusion. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that partly like with the procrastination and the idea of I'll do things differently tomorrow, or I'll start something tomorrow, sort of similar with the self-doubt. Like, it's the procrastination might be a fear of failure, or the self-doubt might be also the same sort of fear of failure and insecurity about whether or not you could succeed. But I really do appreciate what Kathy said about failing fast. That's probably one of the best ways for us to maybe frame this. both concepts, because if you're okay with failing and you don't have that attachment to failure or to success, you're just prepared to just do and approach things with a fresh set of eyes each time, as if it was the first time each time, and having your expectations relatively low each time. I think that as artists we might be a little bit more productive, and we might be more ready to go and more ready to publish books and have art shows and do all sorts of things. Our conditioning in general in society doesn't always allow for that. Our individual circumstances might not allow for that. There's maybe other things that are weighing on us. Remember, the definition of a care is actually a stress, basically. It's a thing that can emotionally affect you, either for the better or for the worse. But they're things that we carry, and I think in Spanish the word for it, pena, is probably the best word. It's a weight that sometimes is carried, and these things, they can hold us back. Which is why on the handout, I also gave us something to consider: the idea of resistance. Because remember, both of them, resistance and procrastination, resistance and self-doubt, resistance is mentioned in both of them. And I think that it's important for us to understand what resistance is. I'm sure that Stephen Pressfield had a different idea of what resistance was. In the context of his book, it probably meant something kind of different. But, these definitions that you see in front of you now are like the official definitions. There's 5 of them. The first one, is an act or instance of resisting or opposition. That's probably going to be, something that is acting against, your wishes, your desires, whatever. There's also the power or capacity to resist, which is also resistance in the more like electronic sense or electrical sense. Same thing with number 3, an opposing or retarding force, like a capacitor that is a resistor. And then, of course, there's the more political one, which is an underground organization of a conquered or nearly conquered country engaging in sabotage and secret operations against occupational forces. Right, so think Star Wars, right? There's the resistance, the rebels, and then the empire. But I think that the biggest one that probably best aligns with what we're talking about is the 5th one: a psychological defense mechanism, wherein a patient rejects, denies, or otherwise opposes the therapeutic efforts of a psychotherapist. We might not be talking about specifically, therapies and that kind of thing, but, the idea of it being a psychological defense mechanism, I think that's an interesting idea, right? Resistance, procrastination, self-doubt, they're defense mechanisms, but not just like a physical one, it's a psychological one, And I might be wrong, I might not necessarily be getting what Stephen Pressfield was saying, but for all of you, I'd like to ask this question. What does resistance really mean? And what does resistance look like? We have 2 examples now. We have procrastination and we have self-doubt. But in addition to those, and this is where I'd like you all to actually take a minute to write them down. You could write them in the chat, but I'd like you to actually really write these down on like a separate sheet of paper or on a notes app or something. But for you, how does resistance manifest itself? And that's your question, and we're going to take like maybe about 2 or 3 minutes to just write a list. In what ways does resistance manifest for you? Just put it in the chat also, so you can reference the question in the chat if in case you need it. So if in case, for the rest of you, if you're struggling to think of ways in which resistance manifests itself in your life, it might be something like watching TV. It might be, preferring to, I don't know, maybe have a cup of coffee before you do your writing. It might be, I don't know, making an excuse to do something else before you sit down to write. It could be work, and prioritizing work. It might manifest itself in different ways. It could be self-doubt. It could be procrastination. But try to be a little bit more specific if you've already begun your list. Let's see if you can think of the actual things that you do, though, right? Maybe it might be, I don't know, like needing to clean your fingernails, or I don't know, like maybe your laptop keyboard, needs
It's called polishing
cleaning.
your nails, sir.
Polishing your nails. No, I mean like cleaning them, Like I know some people that will actually like try to clean under their nails as a way to avoid doing something.
A special brush.
Yeah. So again, just before we this last minute wraps up, think of an actual physical action that you do.
A physical action.
Yeah. Surfing the internet's good. Shopping online is good. Walk outside, taking a walk. Karate.
That's it. That's enough.
All right. Sounds good.
I learned.
Good. There we go.
Oh, I'm learning.
Congratulations, Miss Lois. Your first chat message. Yeah. I see a hand from Mauricio.
If you've ever watched The Simpsons, there's a really perfect episode for this topic where Lisa and Bart, they both they have like this competition to see who can write the best book. And Lisa goes the way of like most artists goes, but before she even starts writing, she plays like at least an hour of like a puzzle game, does all her like morning routine or whatever. And in that time, Bart takes the approach of just sitting with other writers. Mm-hmm. And they end up like with all of their ideas, all being kind of amateurs coming up with a great story versus what, Lisa's like process and wasting time in the morning, drinking her tea, listening to the right playlist. Mm-hmm. So I think it's befitting of today's question.
Nice. Sounds like a good episode. I don't think I've ever seen that one. I stopped watching a long time ago. There's way too many episodes. But yeah, all of you, that did share, gave some pretty strong, answers to that question. Resistance is definitely one of those things that I feel like it plagues a lot of us. It kind of lives in our mind, and I know for a fact that I fall prey to it all the time too. I have my self-doubt. I have my moments of procrastination. I mean, believe it or not, before the pandemic, I used to actually a lot of times create the handouts the day before the workshop of the week, and then the day of, right before the class, I was there trying to print them out, and I was stressing because I was waiting until the last minute. Now that the pandemic has impacted the way in which I deliver the workshops, I have to be prepared a lot more earlier in advance, and even then, there's times where I'm like, man, I really need to do something else before I get to work, because I personally feel like I need to clear my mind before I'm able to really focus. So some of the things that you do, that manifest themselves, some of them might be therapeutic in a way. Some of them might be an important way in which you're able to clear your mind and then, do the work that you need to do. And some of those things may be inhibiting you from actually completing the task at hand. It's a fine balance, but I think that we also need to understand that, that does, sometimes come at a cost. Tina, you raise your hand.
I just want to say, sorry. No, I forgot what I was going to say. No, I was going to say, it's really, there's two different things going on. Okay, we have Conchas, which has an assignment. Then there's the other class where you really need to do something all the time because it needs to be done all the time. And I'm procrastinating on that. But when I think of the assignment, it's kind of like floating in my head and go, that assignment, well, what is it again? Oh, okay. One morning before work, I watched the video and I go, okay, I want to know what exactly I need to do, because when I did the class, I got real nauseated. I was like, oh, I can't think. And there's just too many rules and I don't feel good. And I lay down and I didn't go to work. And anyway, so then a couple days ago, that other poem, the one I wrote the other day, and I was at work and I had a couple minutes and I wasn't doing work at the time. So I had a free time. So I just did it at work. And sometimes that's when I do my work, is if something else is going on, or if I'm like, if I can't do the quiet place, I can't do that. If there's a lot of stuff going on, then I'm thinking about it more. It forces me to think about it. And then I shut everything out and then I concentrate only on that. It's not like that for everybody, but I'm kind of screwy in my brain.
I don't think so, Tina. Everyone, like I said, we all kind of have a process to the way in which we create. But I think it's also good to recognize, when something is either taking too much time or, inhibiting us from being able to move forward. So, yeah, it's all about balance in the end. But Mauricio, you raised your hand.
I was just gonna say, Tina, I think there's a difference between knowing what affects you and finding the right space for it versus kind of willfully putting yourself in a place so you don't do the work. I know for me, I have cats, and this is a little bit TMI, but when the litter box is too full, I can't work. So I have to go clean that bucket because it just it's what's the best way for you to write. And if you are someone that's sensitive to sounds or smells or anything like that, it's important for you to understand yourself and your process, so that you know that you're giving yourself all of the best chances for you to produce your art. Right.
And it is a lot of self-awareness, as Kathy has mentioned in the chat. It really does come down to a sense of balance, and understanding, what is helping you and what is not. Someone wrote, I think, TikTok as a way of resistance manifesting itself for them. But if you're following creators on TikTok that inspire you, that maybe push you to also do work that's I don't know, maybe influenced by them or something like that. There's a way in which it can become a tool, just like going out for a walk can be a tool for you to sort of decompress, ruminate on ideas that you might have, or just whatever it is that you can then translate into a poem or a story or a painting or a photograph, right? There's definitely a way to turn some of those things into a part of your practice, right?
A muse. What is that? Muse?
Yeah, a muse, exactly.
Yeah. I was close.
Yeah, you're very close, Miss Lois. Very close. And that's where the next concept that we're going to look at kind of comes from, right? And it's something that we've probably heard of already. This has sort of become a movement in the past, I want to say 5 years. It's been given the name self-care, right? El autocuidado. And the general definition, this is actually what I found on the Merriam-Webster dictionary website. This is what self-care is defined as. It's care for oneself, specifically health care provided by oneself, often without the consultation of a medical professional. And healthcare, right? We think medicine, things like that, but it's not always, medicine or medical related. Not in the I'm gonna give myself, I don't know, a Robitussin, or some Dimetap to help me fall asleep. it could be something like walking. It could be something like, setting aside a day, a week to, I don't know, go swimming or to visit the beach. These are different ways in which self-care can manifest. So, again, the things that we might think of as resistance might also be, a tool that we can use to create a sense of self-care. So, just balance is really what it comes down to, is having a sense of balance. But more than anything, a sense of self-awareness, being understanding of who you are as a person, what your process is. Why do you procrastinate? Why do you have self-doubt? Ask yourself those questions on a regular basis, and maybe you'll be able to overcome them. It comes down to what your individual motivations are. Now, this is another chance for you to do a little bit of writing. So make sure you have that same sheet of paper or your app or whatever you were using to write. I want you to have that with you right now as you answer the question, what do you do to practice self-care? Yeah, you can make a list, or you can I don't know, maybe reflect on some of the things that you wrote already and quantify them. Right? Tell me, how do you use those things to practice self-care? If it helps, as an example, lately for me, because I'm so normally fried at the end of the day, because I'm on my laptop almost all day long, having to do grants and reading people's work, providing feedback, planning, all of the things that go with running a nonprofit. Sometimes for me, my moment of self-care is really just vegging out in front of the TV, because I have to turn off my brain at some point. So that can be self-care. Now, obviously, just like Ani said, is understanding when you're overindulging, right?
Well, my biggest therapy, can we speak now?
Yeah, if you hope to share, yeah.
Yeah, well, my biggest therapy procedure is Solitaire. Several times I can get on there, and that's a real procrastination for me when I know I should be doing something else in my apartment. But 2, 3, 4 hours is nothing for me to Solitaire. I'm serious, and it helps me to relax. I get me a cup of tea, and just sitting there, all the cares and worries of the world, because I'm a great grandmother, 11 great grand, and 1 little great. So my granddaughter's going into surgery tomorrow, and her mom is going into surgery the day after tomorrow. My daughter-in-law just got over the COVID, and her granddaughter, which is my great-granddaughter, had COVID. And so many things are going on in my brain, and that Solitaire is just relaxes me. That is my greatest therapy. And then I like to cook. So I have enough food, and I serve people in my complex. Everybody knows about my food.
That sounds great. That sounds great, Ms. Lois.
But that's the way that I take care of me, just relaxing with the Solitaire and getting in the kitchen and just cooking.
You know what, Ms. Lois? I think that the Solitaire is a form of focusing. I think that it's helping your brain. I don't think it's taking you away from something. I think it's helping you think better.
Yeah, well, actually, that's very true, but it's a twofold, because there are certain things that I know I should be doing, but it's like that's my husband. I gotta do what he say do. No, but it takes me away from doing some of the things that I say I'll do it later, because this is my place. nobody comes to we don't do visitations anymore,
Mhm.
so yeah. So I'll get it later.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like that you recognize that a game of solitaire, and specifically a game of solitaire with a cup of coffee or tea, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like that I think is an action that you can very clearly point at and say, that's what I do to practice self-care. And I think from what I heard, you also recognize that that is also, if you overindulge, something that can basically cause you to procrastinate and, maybe eventually also create like a sense of stress, right? If you know you have something that you have to do first.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I don't know if it was David that said that, but sometimes when you know you have to get up and do something to bring peace to your mind, I think he said about his cats.
mhm,
There's sometimes when I do says I got to get up and I got to do this to bring peace of mind,
mhm,
for my surroundings. I mean, there's just some things that I just can't get
mhm,
past. I mean, it has to be done.
yeah.
I don't like dishes in my sink. So no matter what's going
Yeah.
on, even at night, if I eat something late, I
Mhm.
hate putting my hands back in the water, but I gotta wash the dishes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and that's probably a good habit. I mean, maintaining a clean kitchen is important. Maintaining a clean house is important. Um, and like I said, all of these things, it does kind of come down to a sense of almost like balance. The reason why we practice self-care is to take care of ourselves, physically and mentally, and spiritually, you know. And again, just like with anything, I feel like it's important to remember to not overindulge in some of those activities too. You
yeah.
know,
The
not
only,
to like
the only,
knock my mom, or the church, but there was a moment in my mom's life where she was going to church, as a way to take care of herself, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. My mom went through a lot when I was younger, and so for her it was a way to feel better, right? Church was a refuge for her. However, my mom went to church 4 days out of the week, 4 out of the 7 days of the week, and 2 of those days of the week, my brother and I and my sister were not with her. We were visiting my dad on the weekends. So, that meant that we were without my mom during the week a lot. And me being the oldest, it meant that I was the one taking care of my brother and sister. I was the one doing all the cooking and all the cleaning, and I was the one helping them with their homework and being there at parent-teacher conferences, all because my mom, was overindulging in her self-care. You know, I don't think it's wrong, that my mom, went to church. I don't think that she deliberately meant to neglect us, but that's what it felt like, right? And so, not having that balance, was causing other issues that to this day, they still kind of exist. So that's maybe TMI, but that is a way in which our own self-care can be an overindulgence and have negative repercussions. So again, just balance, right? It's really important that we have a
yeah.
sense
Well,
of
that's
balance.
that's true because when you first started out with your statement, I thought I was going to be able to say that sounds like my son because
Mm,
my children, I was always in church. Um, Early morning service, afternoon service, during the week service,
mhm,
and I always took them. And when they got like 17, 18 years old, they start setting up.
mhm,
We don't feel like going to church today. And I says, well, just make sure you go once a month and have communion with me.
mhm,
And so, but they said I gave them too much church.
mhm.
But that was their dad was, yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah,
And so that was my refuge.
yeah, yeah. Like I said, now that I'm older, I can recognize what was happening, but during that time in my life when I was like 13, 12, 14, 15, when I really needed both of my parents, but neither one was there, it was hard. It was really hard,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and those are the kinds of things that I think that, impact us and, can create resentments.
Yes,
And
it can. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and can also be like another form of resistance. There's a reason why I struggle a lot of times to write about, my my family and specifically my relationship with my mom, like those, because those things come up. They're really hard for me to address.
They
Um,
hurt.
they do, and those might be
Yeah.
reasons why, looking at myself, those might be reasons why I don't practice my writing as much as I want to, as much as I should, you
Well,
know.
my procrastination on that, and my son tells me, "Mama, write it because it could help somebody else."
Yeah.
But I just can't put that, how do you say, that ink to her
Hmm.
characteristics. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah. I've been there. I've been there. I've been there. You'd be
Yeah.
surprised. I was the oldest as well, and I had to do all those things. Yes, and I saw
Yeah.
so much going on. Oh man, we'll leave it
Yeah.
at that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and I appreciate like those of you in the chat that are um, commiserating, and just sending positive vibes, like these are the things that as we talk about them more, they become easier. As we write about them more, they do become easier. And it goes back, I think, to the idea of like what we were saying earlier about failure, right? If we fail fast, it becomes easier. And the more we practice, it becomes easier. Like all of those things, I think, are very much um, relevant to us as writers and us as practicing artists. Um, and yeah, like Abraham said, the seven deadly sins are basically all about overdoing things. We don't want to overdo them to the point where they become a distraction. Um, and I think that, well, hopefully you all feel like you have a good list of those those things that create resistance in your life, but that also help you find balance in your life. We're gonna continue on. Today's poem is a poem that we visited at least twice in the past years that we've had Conchas y Café. And this one is an updated translation that I did for this particular class. Made it a little bit
One of my
better.
favorites.
Yeah, this is a popular one, and it comes from Charles Bukowski. For those of you who don't know Charles Bukowski, he was born August 16th in the year 1920, passed away March 9th, 1994. He was a German American poet, novelist, and short story writer, and specifically, he was native to here, to Los Angeles, to LA. Um, and to give, I guess, a little bit of kind of insight into who he was. Um, he was a person that did not graduate college. He went to LACC for a couple of years and then dropped out. He worked as a mailman, but he was very unhappy with his life. He knew that he wanted to be a writer, and eventually he did manage to become a pretty well known writer. He was also generally an asshole. He was abusive to women. He was an alcoholic and, a very complicated person. And I suspect that a lot of that came from the way that he was brought up. If you read his biography, you kind of get a sense of that. But also, I think he suffered a lot from self-doubt because, he just didn't do well in school. He dropped out, like I said. He didn't receive an MFA like some of the more contemporary writers of his time. He was not considered an intellectual, and it's kind of reflected in his writing, in his style, and in the way in which he wrote poetry. It feels very plain and generic, but it does say a lot. you know And it is at least an insight into a person that maybe did live with frustrations. But that said, this is Bluebird. And to give someone else a chance to read it, does anyone want to volunteer to read it for us? Let me see. I see Nikolai. You almost never volunteer, man. Let me give you a chance to read it today. And then Miss Luz, if you would like to read it for us in Spanish, you can read it in Spanish. All right. So go ahead, Nikolai.
There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke, and the jerks and the bartenders and the grocery store clerks never know he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? Do you want to screw up the works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I only let him out at night sometimes when everybody's asleep. I say, I know that you're there, so don't be sad. Then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die, and we sleep together like that with our secret pact, and it's nice enough to make a man weep, but I don't weep. Do you?
Excellent. Thank you, Nikolai.
El pájaro azul, por Charles Bukowski. Hay un pájaro azul en mi corazón que quiere salir, pero soy demasiado fuerte para él. Le digo, quédate ahí. No voy a dejar que alguien te vea. Hay un pájaro azul en mi corazón que quiere salir, pero yo le echo whisky por encima e inhalo humo de cigarro. Y las heces y los cantineros y los atendientes del mercado nunca saben que él está ahí por dentro. Hay un pájaro azul en mi corazón que quiere salir, pero soy demasiado fuerte para él. Le digo, quédate abajo. ¿Acaso me quieres alborotar? ¿Me quieres fregar las cosas? ¿Me quieres arruinar las ventas de mi libro en Europa? Hay un pájaro azul en mi corazón que quiere salir, pero soy demasiado astuto. Solo le dejo salir a veces en la noche, cuando todos duermen. Le digo, yo sé que estás ahí, así que no estés triste. Luego lo devuelvo, pero él está cantando un poco, ahí adentro. Todavía no lo dejo morir. Y nos dormimos juntos así, con nuestro pacto secreto. Y es suficiente bonito como para hacer a un hombre llorar, pero no lloro. ¿Y tú?
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Luz.
You're welcome.
Thoughts, first reactions. David?
Well, first of all, I know people have already pointed it out, but the fact that Nikolai has a bluebird on his sweater is awesome for reading this poem. It's just, but anyway, it begs the question, what is the bluebird to Charles Bukowski? Because part of his persona that he embraced was that he was an angry drunk and mean and insufferable. That was part of his mystique. And for him to say, if I let that bluebird out, it's going to ruin my poetry sales in Europe. It's kind of like, well, what is the bluebird? Is there a longing to be happy in him? Because bluebird is often, not always, but often a metaphor for happiness. Just curious other people's thoughts on, for him, what the Bluebird means.
Right. And yes, also shout out to Nikolai and his Bluebird patch on his cardigan. And yes, Miss Michelle, Charles Bukowski did write an autobiography. If I remember right, it's called Ham on Rye. Yeah, there are things that are changed about it, and I don't think when he was alive he officially called it an autobiography. It was basically like a autobiographical story that was fictionalized in some ways.
I think there's several. There's also one called Women, I think, about women that he was with.
Yeah.
And there's also one called Postman, because he worked as a postman.
Yeah.
And that one is extremely compelling, like his life as a postman. The only one I haven't read is Ham on Rye.
Yeah. But yeah, and David is right. It was partially a persona. But if you watch the documentary that was made before he passed away, where he was very much a part of it, it's hard to say that it was actually a persona. I think he really did live the way that he portrayed himself. But anyways.
No, I agree. He totally lived that way. He embraced it.
Yeah.
But I think partly he lived it up to create that almost larger than life.
Yeah, yeah. But the man aside, the poem, and it's a great question. What is the Bluebird? San Juanita?
Well, just because I heard what you said about the author, I would have had a hard time understanding it, but at the same time, it's a very intense poem, and it looks like he has a lot of self-control. Whatever it is that he only let out at night, and it's him saying, but I still don't cry. I think says a lot about something that he was carrying with him. Because he talks about, you want to ruin my book sales. So he knows that he's done great things, but if he lets out this side of him, because that's what it sounds like, then he knew that was going to be his downfall. I think that's, but it sounds like so much sadness, that's what I sensed, sadness that he, nobody knows, nobody can see it, but, he knew about it and he just wouldn't let it out only when he was alone. So
yeah,
that's what it sounds like to me. Very nice poem, by the way.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad your initial reaction was a pretty positive one. And Mojde, thank you for what you wrote in the chat. It actually sounds very poetic, though, what you wrote in the chat. I invited and built a beautiful nest for Charles's Bluebird. I am just waiting for spring to come. I really like that. You might want to save that, Mojde, and use that in your poem for this week. And Miss Michelle is observing, he seemed to carry the world on his shoulders, and yet he was encased and in a cage. Yeah, definitely. Abraham, and then Kathy.
Well, definitely, it feels like a craving for also a certain type of intimacy, because they're just by himself. He doesn't have nobody to relate with, that side of him, which is maybe a little weaker, because he usually portray himself like a tougher man. Like, I have lived through a lot of shit, but I'm standing and I'm all angry and all that. But he fears that by taking the other side of him, he's going to lose what he has accomplished, because people like drama, right? People like the roughness, the story, the conflict on stories. And how you're going to create it if you're not drinking and creating conflict and chaos in your life, right? So that's a hard, what's it called? It's a deal he basically made with the devil, right?
Yeah.
The bird is going to stay there. Only the bird and him are going to know that. The rest of us, just by this poem, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we get a faint little glimpse of, his soul, maybe, of the fragile part of him. Kathy?
Riding along that wave, I take it as the battle between his feminine and masculine side. The feminine being the bluebird, and also, you know, what Abraham was saying about being weak, doesn't want to seem weak. So let's just hide this and stuff it down. And I think that's just the truth of how, what we value more. We value the masculine, and the masculine being like, what's the tangible thing that we can create? Not talking about man or woman, just the where do we place our value in? If what my job, what once I put this poem out there, it's now in the physical, it's now in the masculine, instead of where the heart and the I even like the word intimacy that Abraham talked about, that he's connected to it, but he's also terrified of it. Right. And usually when a man is like this, they're really connected to their feminine side, but it's like so terrifying for them.
Yeah, it's a massive level of fear for sure, and it manifests in a lot of different ways for him, he's afraid of losing book sales. He's afraid of things getting messed up, right? He just says it that way. He's afraid of looking a particular way in front of Nikolai, used the word jerks, and if I remember right, in the recording that Charles Bukowski has, which I think, was it Abraham? Yeah, Abraham, I believe, put the recording, the YouTube recording at least, in the chat if you ever want to check it out and listen to him read it. I think he does say jerks in the recording, like Nikolai read, but I believe originally, and that's the way that I presented it, is how, bye Miss Lois, the way that I presented it is how it was actually written in the book that I got it from, but yeah, I think he actually says the word either sluts or something like that, so like he was very, very gruff in the way that he described the people that he is afraid of looking weak in front of. So it does say a lot, and I think that it's hard to read this poem without understanding his background. That's why I did preface before we read it, a little bit about who he was and the troubles that he had. Jerks, I don't know, but I don't know how I would translate jerks. Cabrones, I guess. To answer San Juanita's question in the chat. But yeah, you can translate the other word. But my point is, that, the bluebird is very clearly a metaphor, right? And it can be a metaphor for a lot of different things. It could be the femininity, right? It could be his feminine side. It could be, his art. It could be his I don't know, his insecurities. It could be his soul, his heart. He could be using the blue bird as a metaphor for something that again is just very fragile, something that he is not willing to fully embrace to a certain degree. So what I want you to do now is think about, what is your blue bird? All right. And is it a blue bird? Is your particular animal, is your nahual, your spirit animal, something different? What is it that you could use as a metaphor for your self-doubts, for your reasons for procrastination, for your resistance? And this is something for you to, you can jot it down now if you have some ideas, but really think about this, because this is going to be what your homework is about. What is your blue bird? Take a couple more minutes, think about it, write it down if it comes to you. All right. So keep thinking about it, because like I said, this spirit animal, your nahual, this is going to be what's going to hopefully inspire your poem for this upcoming week. A cackling crow, a sea otter, a butterfly. Very nice. So this week, your homework is going to be to write a poem inspired by Charles Bukowski's Bluebird. Describe your personal bluebird, quote unquote. Obviously, it doesn't have to be a bird, It could be a blue axolotl, or it could be, a sea otter. But describe your personal bluebird and the ways in which you either support it or refuse it, right? So kind of taking cues from the poem by Charles Bukowski. And this is a chance for you to use either the list of things that, manifest as resistance, or your list of things that you do as self-care, right? And remember, there's balance there. So maybe it's a poem where you use both. Any questions? And yes, I'm actually about to hit enter. There is the prompt in the chat for you to write it down. Either way, it's going to go up in the Google Classroom along with the video once it's posted, and the handout for those of you that haven't downloaded it yet. But yes, write a poem inspired by Charles Bukowski's Bluebird. Describe your personal bluebird and the ways in which you either support it or refuse it.
Louise, can you type in the chat? I will put your homework on Google Class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if
Gracias.
yeah. So next week, again, we're gonna have a session with breakout rooms, so you'll have a chance to share your poem, or any other poem that is inspired, throughout the week that you'd want to share. And in a couple of days on Google Classroom, I will create a new assignment where you will be able to upload your poem. It's not there yet, but it will be there once the video is up on YouTube and everything. What is an axolotl? An axolotl is a little salamander that's native to Mexico, and it's actually, I believe, the only creature in the world. I might be wrong about that, but I believe it's the only creature in the world that's able to fully regenerate itself, and it never ages. It actually can go back to its larval stage, so back to its, like little tadpole stage, and forward to its full adult stage. So very, very fascinating creatures. And they're always happy looking. They always have a smile on their face. That's the little bit that I know about them, but yes, that is very interesting. Never dies like Chabelo. Yeah, they do look like a little dragon. Yeah. All right, and sadly very endangered. That is correct. So yeah, because they're native to the Mexico City area. So yeah, cutest dragon ever. Yeah, I definitely recommend you take a look at them on you can look them up on Google and see plenty of pictures. They're very cute. And for those of you that are curious, they're also the alternate form of the god of the underworld in Mexica mythology, so in the Mexica religion. So he both takes the form of the dog, the xoloitzcuintle, and the axolotl. So yeah, don't get them as pets. All right, so if anybody has any questions or anything, please feel free to either ask now. You can also post it on Google Classroom. If you have no other questions, feel free to get to work. So yeah, with that I say good night. I'll hang out for like another minute. Oh yes, Tina, question?
Are there still any of my books available?
Yes.
Okay. Someone who shall remain nameless, unless they want to say their name right now, but they're trying to buy a book and they couldn't. That's the rumor I heard.
Gustavo.
I
That's
mean,
who it was.
if you do it through the website, it's there. It's on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, on the DSTL Arts
Okay.
website.
I don't know what happened, Gustavo. I'm sorry.
All great. Thanks.
All right. Bye. Good night, everyone.